Rafael, presenting a very beautiful subject that's commonly questioned. So we have been waiting for this for a long time, and thank God it's happening tonight. So please concentrate and be ready with some questions. And if you have any questions, you can ask him at the end.
So just like with her, we're going to be talking about the origin of the universe. Is it natural or is it divine? Now the topic of origin is controversial mainly for one main point. Nobody was there. We have basically two views. One says that God did it, commonly known as creation, and one says that it happens naturally, which is evolution. Now the first thing you have to consider when you're discussing a topic is what it defines. So our job as Christians is to always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you for a reason for a hope that is in you. In other words, that means that as Christians you must be able to articulate a defense for the basis of your faith from all its groups all the time. This includes atheism, evolution, Islam, and so on. Now, the word evolution has 6 meanings, only one, which is scientific. The first one is cosmic evolution. This is the origin of time, space, and matter, explained through the Big Bang. Then you have chemical evolution. This is the origin of high elements evolving from hydrogen. Supposedly the Big Bang created hydrogen, but then where do we get all these other elements from? They suggest that uranium evolved from hydrogen. And the argument is that fusion from stars helped to create this possible. But there's a problem, because you need the chemicals to create the stars and the stars to create the chemicals. Which came first? Which brings, of course, stellar and planetary evolution. How did the stars form? Not a single person knows how one star managed to form. This is the silent embarrassment of modern astrophysics. We do not know how one single one of these stars managed to form. Then we have organic evolution. This is the origin of life from non-living life. Now, according to Paul Davies, nobody knows how a mixture of lifeless chemicals spontaneously organize themselves into the first living cell. As we'll see later on, there is no evidence at all to support this theory. And then we have macroevolution. Macroevolution says of the origin of major kinds of animals. This is what we normally think when we're talking about evolution. Let's say a fish giving birth to a cow or something like that. And with regards to macroevolution, the idea is that we've never seen a dog produce a non-dog. Which of course brings microevolution, which is variations within the kind. Now this one happens. There are hundreds of types of dogs, but they're all dogs. They're variations within the kind. These happen. Now, the first 5 are unscientific. You have to believe in them. There's nothing you can there's no ground to base it on. So from now on, every time I say the word evolution, I'll be talking about the first 5. But what's interesting is when atheists and evolutionists talk about evolution, they make mention number 6. And there's no argument. It happens. So, cosmic evolution, the Big Bang. In the beginning, there was nothing, which exploded. Well, what exploded? From 1894 to 1966, the theory was that what exploded was no more than a few light years in diameter, or at the very least, that would be 2 light years, or about 12 trillion miles. By 1965, it was reduced to 442.5 million kilometers. By 1972, it was 114.2 million kilometers. By 1975, it was 86.9 thousand kilometers. In 1983, it was a trillionth the diameter of a proton. Today, it's nothing at all. Nothing exploded. So according to April 2002 edition of Discover magazine, it says, where did everything come from? And then they have a little blurb, summary. And this part says, the universe burst into something from absolutely nothing, 0, nada. As it got bigger, it became filled with even more stuff that came from absolutely nowhere. How is that possible? Ask Adam Booth. His theory of inflation helps explain everything. So, what does Adam Booth say? Adam Booth says that the observable universe could have evolved from an infinitesimal region, which basically means a really small thing. It is then tempting to go one step further and speculate that the entire universe evolved from literally nothing. So, in the beginning, nothing exploded. And then it created hydrogen and helium, and these combined and then created stars and planets, including Earth. And on Earth, it started to rain on the rocks. It originally started as a molten mass, and it started to rain on the rocks for millions of years. And then cells started to form, but atoms were developing here. And you got molecules, and molecules becoming single-cell organisms becoming multicellular organisms. And more as time went on, it became more advanced and got mollusks become fish become amphibians, and become reptiles, and then eventually mammals, and eventually man. The product of millions of years of random chance events. Now everybody, keep note of this fish. Keep note of this fish. I'm going to handle it. Okay, so you might wonder what evidence do they have to support this theory. Now, as far as what they support, we know their confidence regarding the theory. In a Science Digest article of May 1981, it says the first billion of a second, and then using a simple system of logic, we can now deduce in exact detail just what happened during the first split second of creation. Now, it's interesting what they say they can do, but they can go back to that minute fraction of a second and tell us what happened using logic. Now, think about it. What does your logic tell you about explosions? Has anyone ever seen an explosion create order? Not that I know of. But if it happened, then it should be scientifically reproducible and observable. We should be able to blow some objects up and see order progressing, which has never occurred. Because given common sense logic and the laws of thermodynamics, we know that things go from order to disorder with time, not vice versa. So for example, if you were to have some blocks and pack them up neatly, given time they'll degenerate and break down. Or a car, if it was brand new, stick it in the garage for 100 years, you think it'd get better? No, it degenerates, it breaks down, it rusts. Everything tends from order to disorder, and the Bible supports this. In Hebrews 1 to verses 10 to 11, it says, "They will perish, but you remain, and they will grow old like a garment." Now, a garment is interesting. What happens is that the fibers start to rub against each other, and they start creating dust particles. And given time, this makes it go weaker and weaker, and then it becomes more wriggly and stuff. And then eventually it becomes worn away and it grows old. Everything is breaking down. They all grow old like a garment. Absolutely nothing gets better with time, apart from wine and stuff. But evolution, contrary to the observable physical evidence, says that disorder can become order given time. When they say that humans probably evolved from bacteria that lived more than 4 billion years ago. So that's disorder becoming order, which violates what we see. Now, in Stephen Hawking's universe, written by John, he says, the odds against a universe like ours emerging out of something like the Big Bang are enormous. I think clearly there are religious implications whenever you start to discuss the origin of the universe. And this is really interesting. Every time you try to study the universe, you always come, if you're unbiased, you always reach a conclusion that includes a God with a divine hand, basically. Stephen Hawking wrote in A Brief History of Time, so long as the universe had a beginning, we could suppose it had a creator. But if the universe is really completely self-contained, having no boundary or edge, it would be neither beginning nor end. It would simply be. What place then for a creator? Now, the first part is relevant, the bottom half seems a little unrelevant, but it's going to make a lot of sense in the very last line. Now, this book is called The Evolution Crunch. It's 965 pages long, and it has the motto, Scientific Facts Which Annihilate Evolutionary Theory. It's incredible, and it's got thousands and thousands of facts, and it just destroys this theory. I'll email it to Solomon, or my brother, and I'll put it on Facebook, okay? So it's very good. So the idea is that simple became complex, or disorder to order. Now they say that this happened not because of just time, but it was helped with mutations and natural selection. Now, no doubt, mutations do occur. If, for example, we have fish with mutations of bent wings, lungs, and blind. Now, what a mutation is basically considered, in the simplest terms, a mistake in the genetic code. Now, the thing with mutations is they emerge based on what is available. Now, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Now, from this word, you can make various other words. For example, you can make the word crib, X-ray, nobody, bounce, uncle, but you can't make the word Christmas. That information isn't there. So mutations basically are extensions of information that is there. No new information is added. And another thing with mutations is, as the more they go on, the more limits there are. For example, if I was to make the word bounce, from the word bounce, again, I can make some more words. So consider bounce a mutation from deoxyribonucleic acid. And then from bounce, we have 1 or ounce. Ounce is bigger, so we choose ounce. And then from ounce, we can make 1, and then from 1, on or no. So as time goes on, more mutations and more limits. So there are limits to mutations. So for example, if you've got a rat, and it gets soaked in some radioactive stuff, and then millions and millions and millions of years later, a new species. Now, a good question is, where in the mouse's genetic code, in the DNA, where was the information to make a snake's tongue, a rhino's horns, hawk's wings, a lizard's behind, or a fish's stomach? That information wasn't there. No matter how numerous they may be, mutations do not produce any kind of evolution. What they do is they rearrange existing information but do not increase genetic complexity. So for example, here's a goat that has 6 legs. No new information is added. It already had the information to make a leg. You just put 2 more in one place. A snake with 2 heads. And this is Francisco Lentini, born with 3 legs, no new information added. Young Frank, no new information added. And Myrtle Corbin, born with 4 legs. Okay, so they rearrange existing information but do not increase genetic complexity. There's a problem with the video, so I'm just going to have to play it. We'll see if you want to see the rest of the video, just ask again. That, of course, was Richard Dawkins, the author of The God Delusion. Okay. So in all the reading I've done in the life science literature, I have never found a mutation that added information. All point mutations that have been studied on the molecular level turn out to reduce the genetic information and do not increase it. So this idea that mutations somehow propelled some monkey into being a human is totally false. Okay, so the idea is that it was simple to complex and mutation natural selections occur. But is that true? Did it go from simple to complex? This is a skeleton of a turtle today, and here's one of the past. As you can see, in the past they were bigger, they were more complex. Here's another picture. This is a skeleton of a sloth today. Here's one of the past. Again, they were gigantic in the past. Here's a snake's skeleton of today. And here's one of the past. This is a Titan bowl, which was the size of a bust. It's huge. This is wood. It looks like it's wood, but this is representing what it would actually be like. And then you've got the megalodon. This is the great white shark here. This is the megalodon. So again, in the past, they were bigger, they were more complex. This is one tooth of the megalodon. You can actually walk inside its mouth. Now, the Bible says in Genesis 6:4 that there were giants in the earth in those days. Now, the average height of man today is about 1.8 meters. And of course, everything is... Alright. Okay. So of course, everything is proportionate. This is a modern day hand. And if you look at these bones here, this is a proximal flange. Now, this is one of today, present day. And this is one of the past. Of course, it was much, much bigger. Now, big hands suggest bigger tools. This tool here was designed to be held in this grip. Stone implement of gigantic size found in southern Morocco in 1954 to be held between the thumb, forefinger, and middle finger. It was a precision tool. So as you can see from perspective, I mean, they were huge. This is a femur. This is a replica of an actual femur that was found. Of course, it's the size of a human. And the femur is roughly around 1/4 of the length of a person. So if you look at a person's femur and it's this big, you can kind of do the math and suggest what height he could be. Here's another one. This is 120 centimeters long. And again, here's perspective. A giant. And if you're wondering, yeah, Goliath was one of these people. The Bible says that he was 6 cubits and a span, which rounds out to 2.75 meters tall, which interestingly enough is the exact same height as Robert Waller, the world's tallest man. He was also 2.75. So no, things were either bigger and more complex and more variety in the past, or they didn't change at all. Here's a present day bat. Here's one of the past. No change. A praying mantis of today, praying mantis of the past. Again, no change. An ant of today, an ant of the past. Again, no change. a mosquito of today and a mosquito of the past. Once again, no change. So in terms of the basic biochemical design, no living system can be thought of as being primitive or ancestral with respect to any other system. Nor is there the slightest empirical hint that an evolutionary sequence among all the incredible diverse cells on Earth. So basically, on the molecular level, there's nothing that even suggests that one evolved from another. So based on the physical, observable fossil evidence, we can see that the foundational principle of evolution did not appear to match actual science. Evolution is not a fact. Evolution doesn't even qualify as a theory or a hypothesis. It is a metaphysical research program, and it's not really testable science. This was said by a philosopher of science. Okay, so then we've got organic evolution. This is the fourth or third time. With organic evolution, which was the life from non-living life, we look at the law of biogenesis. Now, the law of biogenesis was attributed to Louis Pasteur. Now, the law of biogenesis states that life arises from pre-living life, not from non-living material. Pasteur and others' empirical results were summarized in the phrase, all life is from life, also known as the law of biogenesis. Pasteur stated that spontaneous generation is a dream. Spontaneous generation is a term coined to basically life going from no life. How does life start? Now, listen to this quote. I myself have little doubt that in England it was long-age uniformitarian geology and the theory of evolution that changed us from a Christian to a pagan nation. That's interesting that something in geology contributed to a nation going from Christian to pagan. So what is uniformitarianism? The idea is that Earth's process that occurs today are similar to those that occurred in the past. So this is basically the current erosion rate. It's very gradual and very slow. So if you have a valley like this, after thousands and thousands of years or millions of years, it starts to make very gradual changes into this. Now, the idea is that the current rate was constant throughout history. Now, the idea behind this was to take Noah's flood and replace it with an alternative, which was an unguided natural process. So Noah's flood didn't carve the canyons and so on. It happened gradually, millions and millions of years. Now, the principle of uniformitarianism was really endorsed by Charles Lyell, who in 1830 wrote a book called Principles of Geology, where he introduced the geologic column. Now, the geologic column showed where he gave each layer of Earth a name, an age, and an index fossil. Now, uniformitarianism, again, is summed up as the present is the key to the past. What we see today can be used to explain what happened in the past. And the Bible also mentions it as well. It says that in the last days there shall come scoffers that say, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. Okay, so Charles Lyell first published his famous book, Principles of Geology, in 1830, the book which influenced the thoughts of Charles Darwin, successfully promoted the doctrine of uniformitarianism. So this is very much linked with the evolution theory. So how does this theory work? Let's say an archaeologist unearths this fossil. What he does is he looks in the fossil index until he finds a match. Then he sweeps over to the left and follows to the age, and then he concludes that this fossil is 345 million years old and came from the Carboniferous layer. That's how it works. But there's a problem. If I was to ask, how do you know how old that fossil is? The answer would be, we know how old the fossil is by which layer it comes from. So for example, if you have the Carboniferous layer and you begin to excavate and you find a fossil, then you know that this fossil is 345 million years old. So if this fossil came from that layer, then this fossil must also be 345 million years old. But if you were to ask them, how do you know how old the layer is? The answer is you can tell how old the layer is by which fossils you find. So if you were to excavate some unknown period like in the strata and unearth this fossil, you would look at the fossil index, determine that this is 345 million years old, and so this fossil came from this layer, and this layer must also be 345 million years old, or the Carboniferous layer. So basically the fossils date the layer, and the layer dates the fossil. It's a circle. Paleontologists cannot operate this way. There is no way of simply look at a fossil and say how old it is unless you know the age of the rock it comes from. This is of course by a paleontologist. Right? The rocks do date the fossils, but the fossils date the rocks more accurately. It's Stratigraphy cannot avoid this kind of reasoning if it insists on using only temporal concept, because circularity is inherent in the variation of time scales. So basically it's a circle. Okay, remember that fish I told you guys, remember? Here's where it comes in handy. Now that fish was a fossil index for the Devonian era, 410 million years old. See here and here. Now the idea is that this fish, the coelacanth, was the evolution of the amphibians. So the intermediate fossil is this fish, the coelacanth. So again, if I want to know how old this layer is, I'd take it, and now I begin to excavate until I find something. I find it, I consult the geologic column, I look for a match and fossil index, I find it, I look at the age, and then I determine that this layer was 410 billion years old. But there's a problem. This 410 million year this 410 million year old lobe-fin ancestor is very much alive today. Seen here, and then of course ancient swimmers. It's kind of hard to read from here, but the coelacanth was thought to have gone extinct with the dinosaurs rediscovered in 1938. It was photographed here in a rare archaeological photo. So it's still alive. And again, scientists have debated whether the direct answer of amphibians was a coelacanth or a lungfish. However, recent evidence has led biologists to believe that it was neither. The ancestor of amphibians was most likely a third type of lobe-fin fish, which is now extinct. Coelacanths was thought to have been extinct for millions of years until one was caught off the coast of Africa in 1938. Now, if you think that was bad, this is a trilobite. Again, if you look at the geologic column and you search, at the very, very bottom, 600 million year old fossil from the Cambrian layer. But there's a problem. A rubber-heeled shoe, or a gazmakowicz, killed this apparently 600 million year old ancestor. So it's not seen here, it's a rubber shoe. Now the first rubber-heeled shoe was patented on January 21st, 1899 by Irish-American Humphrey O'Sullivan. So basically, a shoe that was first developed in 1899 crushed and killed a 600 million year old ancestor. Alright, and here's another picture of it. Now, Dr. H.H. Dolan of Utah's Geological Survey verified it was not a fake. So it's a genuine fossil by the trilobite crushed by a rubber shoe. And there's theory that it might be one still alive. You have a living trilobite. And there's another lady holding a trilobite. Now, the great catastrophe of Noah's flood was long seen as the explanation for most of the phenomenon of the rocks, especially the fossils they contain. So the theory as Christians is that the majority of these geological phenomena that are explained with billions and billions of years, we understand them as being a result of Noah's flood. You know, like, yeah. If there are a column of sediments deposited continuously since the formation of the Earth, the entire history of the planet could be reconstructed. Unfortunately, no such column exists. This thing literally only exists in the textbooks. And this, the geological column is considered the Bible for the evolutionists. They worship this thing. Not literally. Okay, so how do you get an age of the Earth from the Bible? Does the Bible give any insight? Now, this is the reference or the legend. One of these lines represents 10 years. The Bible says that Adam lived 130 years and begat Seth. And the days after he begat Seth were 800 years. And then Seth lived 105 years and begot Enos. And Seth lived after he begat Enos 807 years. And Enos lived 90 years and begat Canaan, and Canaan lived. And after Enos begat Canaan, he lived 815 years. And then Canaan lived 70 years and begat Mahalalel, and Mahalalel lived, after he built up Mahalalel, he lived 840 years, and so on and so forth. When you're done doing this, you reach this, which shows the creation of Adam being around 400 BC. Now it's interesting because they show the flood is 1,656 years after the creation. And it's actually really interesting. It's fun. I might put it on Facebook as well. 4,400 BC. Okay. So basically, in the creationist timeline, the universe was created around 6,000 years. The theory is 6 to 10,000 years. And then there was a flood 4,400 years ago. Jesus was born, and then we're in the present now. In the evolutionist timeline, the Big Bang occurred 20 billion years ago. The Earth formed 4.6 billion years ago. Life appeared 3 billion years, and then man evolved 3 million years. But where does the evidence lie? But once so deflected into short period comets, these comets must have comparatively short lifetimes, astronomically speaking, and probably no short period comet can survive more than about 10,000 years. So, short period comets have a lifespan of around 10,000 years. They cannot live after 10,000 years. And also, the creationists and the evolutionists view, they both hold the idea that the comets and stuff were created at the moment of creation. So, in the creationist view, the universe is 6,000 years old, and the Earth is 6,000 years old. So short period comets, there's no problems with. But if you look at the evolutionist data, the universe is 20 billion years old, and short period comets are less than 10,000 years old. So you've got big problems. The creation 1, evolution 0. If the idea that if the Earth was billions of years old, there should be no short period comets, but there are. The oldest living organism is the bristlecone pine, 4,300 years old. Now, the oldest organism, less than 4,300 years old. Now, the idea of the creationist view is that, of course, the Earth was created 6,000 years ago, but there was a flood that destroyed everything. So, consistent with this view, we would predict that the oldest living organism would be younger than the flood. So, if the flood happened to destroy everything, the oldest organism must be after the flood, and that's what we see. So, we've got no problems. Evolutionist theory: the Earth was 4.6 billion years old. Life arose 3 billion years old, and big problems. Creation 2, evolution 0. Oceans today are 3.6% salt. They could have gone from fresh water to 3.6% salt in less than 5,000 years. So the salt in the sea could be traced back naturally as being around less than 5,000 years old. And in the creationist view, the Earth is 6,000 years ago, so there's no problems. And the flood was 4,400 years ago. So there's no problem with the creationist view. In the evolutionist view, the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, life 3 billion, so you've got big problems. Creation 3, evolution 0. Okay. Now, the first developed systems of word writing appeared only about 5,000 years ago, and the oldest languages that can be reasonably reconstructed is already modern, sophisticated, and complete from any evolutionary point of view. So the first writing systems are less than 5,000 years old. In the creationist view, the Earth is 6,000, and man was 6,000. So there's no problems. In the evolutionist view, Earth is 4.6, life is 3, and man evolved 3 million years old. So you've got big problems. Creation 4, evolution 0. Now the oldest human blood that was discovered was from Otzi, the Iceman. It was 4,300 years old. Sorry?
So you mean 5,000?
Yeah, 5,300. So oldest preserved blood is 5,300. So the Earth is 6, man is 6, again no problems. Evolution 4.6, 3, and then 3 million for man. So you've got big problems. Creation 5, evolution 0. Again, once again, this book is going to be uploaded on Facebook. It's got thousands more. So according to evolution, how old is the Earth? In 1770, George Buffon concluded the Earth was around 70,000 years old. In 1905, the age of the Earth was officially 2 billion years old. In 1969, the official age of the Earth and Moon was 3.5 billion years old. Today, students are taught the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. That means that the Earth is getting older at a rate of 25 million years per year for the past 220 years, or 60 years per minute. So next time an evolutionist says, we know the age of the Earth, you can safely say, no you don't. Okay, now for dating methods. How do they come up with these numbers and dates? There are basically two main techniques. The first being radiometric dating. Now it's said that uranium, lead, potassium, argon are good at dating volcanic matter and such. We won't go and waste time with explaining how they work, we'll just look at the results. So results from radiometric dating. You've got lava rocks, 1800, 1801, that's 209 years ago. Showed an age of 60 million to 3 billion years old. Of course, not 209. Potassium argon produced an age of 3.5 million years old for lava flow that was from 1949 to 1975. Now, the Sunset Crater basalt in Arizona, formed in 1064 to 1065 AD, had been examined by two samples and produced two different answers. 0.27, give or take 0.09 million years, and 0.25, give or take 0.15 million years ago. So next time evolution says, you know the age of these samples? No, you don't. There's much more, and again, the evolution cruncher has got thousands or more against the radiometric or the dating method. So it's on Facebook, so check it out. So basically, the rule of thumb is, if you've got a rocks with a known age, it doesn't work. But if it's of an unknown age, it is assumed to work. Apart from apart from very modern examples, which are really archaeology, I can think of no case of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. So it really doesn't work. Okay, then we have carbon-14, probably the most popular one. We won't go into how it works, just look at the results. Living mollusk shells were carbon dated as being 2,300 years old. Shells from living snails were carbon dated as being 27,000 years old. Freshly killed seals were dated as being 1,300 years old. So again, evolutionists, we know the age of this animal. No, we don't. Now, everybody believes in God. This is probably my favourite quote. It's Dr. George Wald. Now, he's an evolutionist, professor emeritus of biology at the University of Harvard, and a Nobel Prize in evolutionary biology. Now, he says, there are only two possibilities as to how life arose. One is spontaneous generation arising to evolution. The other is a supernatural creative act of God. There is no third possibility. Spontaneous generation, that life arose from non-living matter, was scientifically disproven 120 years ago by Louis Pasteur and others. Now, Louis Pasteur, that was a word by Genesis mentioned earlier. That leaves us with only one possible conclusion, that life arose as a creative act of God. I will not accept that philosophy because I don't want to believe in God. Therefore, I choose to believe in that which I know is scientifically impossible, spontaneous generation arising to evolution. This is another Nobel Prize winner. He says, the pathetic thing about it is that many scientists are trying to prove the doctrine of evolution, which no science can do. So it's not really science, you have to believe it. It's a religion. Evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it only because the only alternative is special creation, and that is unthinkable. Okay, now to say everybody believes in God must, of course, include Richard Dawkins, the author of The God Delusion, a book in which he says in chapter 2, the God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, push, malevolent bully. So, does he believe in God? Yeah. Again, there's a problem with the video time.
The God.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I've told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anyone.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe.
Well,
but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
Alright, so again, Everybody believes in God. Okay, now here's, but don't think so badly of Richard Dawkins. While he does go against Christianity, he also is very prominent against Islam, so he's very into. Okay, this next part is a bit irrelevant to the main problem, so I could probably take some questions now before we. Anyone have any questions? Nope. All right. So this part's a very important part. How did dinosaurs fit in the Bible? And how come the word dinosaur isn't mentioned in the Bible? Now, the word dinosaur was created in 1841 by a guy called Sir Richard Owen. It's made up of two, I think they're Latin words, I'm not sure. Dino meaning terrible, and saurus meaning lizard. That was in 1841. So before 1841, they're referred to as dragons. And the word dragon is mentioned 34 times in the King James Version, not the New King. The New King, they exchanged it with the word like fowl and beast and such. But again, you've got poisons of dragons, two dragons, heads of dragons, young dragons, slay the dragons, habitation of dragons, and so on. In red, that's symbolic. The red dragon is symbolic for Satan, the book of Revelation. But the Bible does mention dragons. Now, science confirms that lizards never stop growing. Reptiles constantly start growing. So in this period where people used to live to be 900 and stuff, these lizards could grow to be really big. Herodotus in 440 BC, he said that I went once to a certain place in Arabia, almost exactly opposite the city of Butu, to make inquiries concerning a winged serpent. On my arrival, I saw the backbones and ribs of serpents in such numbers as is impossible to describe. The winged serpent is shaped like the water snake. Its wings were not feathered, but resemble very closely those of the bat. Now, it sounds like he saw a pterodactyl. This was in 440 BC. St. George is famous for slaying a dragon. Now, this is known as a baronox, which its fossils were found in 1980 something, I think 1981 or 1963 something. So again, St. George is famous for slaying a dragon. Okay, in 900 AD, there was an Irish writer who recorded an encounter with a huge beast with iron nails on its tail, which pointed backwards. Its head was shaped like a bit like a horse, and it had thick legs and strong claws. The details matched the saurus and so on, so the stegosaurus. This is in 900 AD. Now for the big one. The one in the middle is known as the plesiosaur. Now, next to New Zealand, there were some Japanese fishermen fishing for some fish in this fishing area. And they actually they pulled up something weird. It was decaying. Well, it's unknown by then, but it was 2.6 meters long. It weighed 1,818 kilograms. It was hauled up from 75 meters down. This was in 1977. Here's another picture. Again, so this is something they have known. It looks like a plesiosaur, a decaying plesiosaur. And in 2002, there was another beach plesiosaur. This is in the sign. There are some autopsy pictures of one that was freshly breached, so it's not screams, there's no blood. Okay, this one. It was in Nova Scotia Bay, somewhere in Canada. It was 2002 again. Now there's a retired zoologist, so carcass on Nova Scotia beast is new to science as a retired zoologist. And of course they excavated, they opened it up and they staked it, and it's still fresh. There is blood there. The meat's still pink. As you can see the spines there. Because that's pretty healthy, like it's pink and stuff. I think that's its head. I think that's the contents of the stomach, I'm not sure. And the thing was covered in hair. So yeah, that's all the beach plesiosaur. Now, in 1989, there was another one, California's Nessie. Its head's seen here. Now, this was huge. So its head was here, and this is the outline of body. So its neck was 6 meters long. Now, E.L. Wallace, president of the Natural History Society of British Columbia, he said that my examination of the monster was quite thorough. It had no teeth, its head is large, and its neck fully 20 feet long. The body is weak and the tail is only 3 feet in length from the end of the backbone. With a build like it possesses, it must have lived on herbage and undoubtedly inhabited a swamp. I would call it a type of plesiosaur. Another witness, Judge W.R. Springer of Santa Cruz, felt the creature was from a prehistoric age. He added his observations, evidence of 2 short feet and flippers, and probably swam with its head high above the water. which matches our description. So again, they're beach lizards. Now, remember this one earlier, we were talking about the oldest human blood. It was dated as being 5,300 years old, and it was said that the red blood cells that his team found had classic donut shapes seen in healthy people. And then they say it is very interesting to see that red blood cells can last for such a long time. So 5,300 years old is a very long time. It's remarkable to science that blood can stay healthy for that long. And that was 5,300 years. But they have found dinosaur blood that was just as healthy, and dinosaur skin. Soft tissue discovered on dinosaur bone, intact up to 70 million years old. The translucent vessels were so elastic that when one was stretched out, it was then released, it would snap back like a rubber band. So it's pretty fresh and healthy. The tissues are still soft, said whatever, who led the research team. The microstructures that look like cells are preserved in every way. So 5,300 years old, that's incredible that it could be preserved that long. So dinosaur blood and bone and tissue to be preserved for as well, and that good, must of course suggest that it's not millions and millions of years old. It must be thousands, like the odds. Now, according to National Geographic, no human being has ever seen a live dinosaur. Well, if that was true, then why did the Aboriginals draw them on their cave? So I've got some Aboriginal drawing here. The angry plesiosaur will take their friend there. So they drew on their cave. And this is the Ika Guidestone. Over 50,000 were found. Now, they drew again, so you got numerous dinosaurs. And this is from 300 BC to 800 AD. So you got the Acrocanthosaurus, T-Rex, and the Triceratops. But you'll notice that they draw circles on their skin. Again, here's another one, a dinosaur. They drew circles on their skin. Firstly, why would they draw them, and why did they draw circles on their skin? And here's another one, a T-Rex and a man. Again, circles on the skin. So why circles? Now, there was some fossilized dinosaur skin found in Bolivia with circles on the skin. There's little rosette patterns. So the question is, how did these people know to draw circles unless they saw them in real life? Now, the Bible also mentions dinosaurs, behemoth and leviathan. They're both described in the Bible as being massive, ultimately dinosaurs. Again, yeah, the rosette patterns. Again, here's another one. Okay. In 1910, there was an article that was a newspaper that was released that said, "Is a brontosaurus roaming Africa's wilds? There could be dinosaurs." 1948. Dinosaur hunting in the Congo. During the 1920s, there was a theory that they had survived. So, interest in the Congo region of Central Africa based on suspicions that dinosaurs might still exist there. Again, a dinosaur-like beast photographed during African jungle expedition. Hunter's long trek for living dinosaur. I recommend watching this movie, How to Train Your Dragon. It kind of shows a nice insight into what it would be like. But wait a second. Aren't dragons mythical creatures? They weren't real and they don't exist. Now, those actually, what we're thinking of when we think of dragons, there was some that were actually found. The Xinwei ancient fossil in China, they found one. Yeah, of a dragon. So next time you see this, it could be real. Again, I recommend watching this movie. In the 1946 English dictionary, dragon was defined as now red. So dinosaurs were big lizards called dragons that lived with Adam and Eve. So in the end, creation wins. Now, Charles Darwin wrote in the book Life and Letters, page 228, "Often a cold shudder has run through me as I've asked myself whether I have devoted myself to a fantasy." Any questions?
How about petrol?
Sorry?
Petrol and petroleum.
Alright, okay, so this theory, this is petrol and petroleum. Okay, so the theory is that in order to create petrol is basically compressed living things, prior living things. And the idea is that you need pressure and heat. So in the geological one that replaces the Noah's Ark, what they say is that after millions and millions of years, an animal dies, and then millions of years later, erosion, it kind of compresses these, and with heat, it creates the animals to oil. Now, the alternative theory is that with Noah's flood, all of that produced the necessary heat and pressure to turn all these animals into oil rather quickly, rather than the millions of years that we're told. So that's the alternative theory. And there is evidence that none is included here. Any other questions?
I've heard this theory before from somebody. I asked them, okay, where you can't determine where the Big Bang came from, and they said, okay, well, if there was a God, where did they come from?
That's you reminded me. In the earlier slide, I got a quote from Stephen Hawking, where the last half didn't really make sense. It was talking about if there was a beginning, then there can't be a where's the place for the creator. So the question I'm going to answer is, if God created the universe, who created God? Okay, this is a very common question. It's a very simple answer. Now, when somebody asks this question, we always try to answer the question. But the thing is that the question itself is invalid. If I was to ask you why elephants scream, and you would really think about it, maybe it's a pigment in the skin, it would be an invalid question, so your research would be in vain. Now, who created God is an invalid question comes from the idea that we imply that God is limited by time. So if I was to say, where did you come from? I can say that it makes sense because you're in the present now, so you must have had a past. And since you're not in any immediate danger, you have a future. But God is not limited by time. He lives in eternity, which is outside of time. There's no time in heaven. So for God, that verse, 2 Peter 3, verse 8, it says that for God, 1 day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. So it's trying to say that to us, 1 day is 24 hours. But to God, 1 day might as well be 1,000 years, and 1,000 years 1 day. God is not limited by time. So to say that who created God implies he's limited by time. So itself, it's an invalid question. And if God is limited by time, then he's not God. Does that make sense? Are you good?
The other thing is he created time. That's the other thing. A lot of people don't realise that. He created time. He created the time. Watch that you click means nothing because he created it to begin with. There's no limit. But we here as humans feel like there's a limit. We're going to pass, an hour passes, a day passes, we get old and everything. We see, that's what we see. But he sees a different picture.
So God created time. He was there before time started, and he will be also there after time finished in the second coming. So with the second coming, time will finish. There will be no more time. It will be above time with the second coming of our Lord.
God lives in eternity, which is past, present, future at once.
A lot of people struggle thinking that. That's why.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, they can't picture it.
It's hard to figure out.
It's hard to picture because we don't know it. Abuna Nami gave you a really good example. He said, if you're in your mum's womb, you could never, ever, ever have imagined the world that we live in now. Impossible. It's the same thing. Once you pass away, you can't describe to anyone what you're going to see in the afterlife because it's not part of your narrow band of experience. In your mum's womb, you would never imagine what you see here.
When Saint Paul went up to heaven, he came back saying that he could not describe it because he couldn't find the language of what he knows here on earth to describe what he found there. So the language that we know is usually describing something that we have seen before. If you haven't seen anything like this before, you cannot really describe it. That's the problem.
Any other questions?
The line mentioned in the Bible about how old was Adam and how old was his offspring. Is it the years that we have now or the years that...
Oh yeah, it's based on genealogies. So the idea is that Adam was 130, and then he begot Seth.
130 of our...
Yeah, 24 hours.
Time or God's year?
We have to understand something that's really important. That the first few days of creation, there was no sun. Right? So as there was no sun, the definition of a day as we know today is when the earth revolves around the sun. So it revolves around itself in front of the sun. So if there was no sun, that means it's really difficult to tell how long is that day. Well, the only answer to this is that God knows how long was that day. We can have assumptions, we can have theories, we can have counter theories, but at the end of the day, nobody was there to describe what was
happening.
Yeah, but based on what in the Bible, we said that the earth is 6,000 years.
Well, God created Adam on the sixth day, and from the sixth day, we can count 5,000, as Andrew says, 5,500 or 5,000 and a half up until our Lord Jesus. So that is really what we have. We have a record of that based on the record in the Bible.
I actually object to the idea that the days were long periods of time. Okay, the way I see it, I'll do this very brief. So if the idea that what I just said is that the first 3 days could be long periods of time that only God knows how long, because the sun's created on day 4. Now, what is time to God? We just discussed that God is not limited by time. If I was to ask you, what is one day to God? Nothing, right? It's nothing.
One day of God's day, or one day
No, to God. To God. So if I was to tell God, give me a minute, for example. To God, what is a minute? It's nothing. So God is not limited by time. Time means nothing to God. So, if you read the Bible and it says that God created the universe in 6 days, to God 6 days is nothing. But to man, 6 days is 144 hours. So if he wanted to talk to us and give us a message, he would use our understanding of time. So to say that the first 3 days weren't normal 24-hour days, but were long periods of time that nobody knows who except for God, who will never be able to ask until we're dead, I mean, it's illogical. I don't think it makes sense.
Let me ask you this in this point. You said that Adam got his first, Adam and Eve got the first son after 130 years. So how long they stayed on paradise?
Well, the idea is that it was between the first 130 years.
After they kicked out from paradise?
Yeah.
So how long they stayed in paradise?
Within the first 130 years. Sometime, the Bible gives no dates.
Yeah, we don't know.
But no, the Bible gives no dates, but we have a limit.
That's the answer. We don't know.
No, there's a limit. We don't know the exact, we can't say in the 34th year at 5 o'clock. But we can say sometime before, like within the 130-year range. No, within the 130-year range. We can say it's within 130 years, but we can't say...
130 years, that's outside paradise. But
No. From the creation.
Our question is clear and cut. How long they stayed in paradise?
Well, that time isn't specified.
We don't know.
But there is a limit to how long they were in there. That's the point.
What is the
130 years. Because that's why we got set.
130 years, that's outside when they kicked out from paradise.
No. So what happened to...
Adam was created until he begot his first son.
Yeah, so the whole genealogies begin later on. Genesis chapter 1, the first 35 verses, it talks from day 1 to day 6. The last two words of the first chapter is the 6th day. So later on, after in the Bible, when you look at the days and the dates, it talks how God saw Adam was lonely. He wanted to create a helper, so he got some animals, and then Adam named the animals, and then he saw that none of them were suited. So then he saw he was lonely, then he made Eve, then he took Adam, he created the garden, then he put Adam in the garden, and then that's when he did the whole, give them the animals and everything.
We talking originally that you objecting that the one day of God is 24 hours.
Yeah.
I think the question mark of how long is the day is not our issue tonight.
I think it's very...
We have this clear that we're talking about creation, we're talking about theories and science. Is it evolution? Is it creation? This is our topic for tonight.
I'll give you my strongest point. It won't take long. My strongest point to prove that it was literal 24-hour days. Okay? Now, the order of the days goes like this. In the beginning, God created the heavens, the earth, and light. Day 2, the earth is covered in water. Day 3, there's vegetation and the land. Day 4, that's when creates the sun, moon, and stars. And day 5, that's when creates the flying things and the swimming things. Okay? And then day 6, land, animals, and man. If you believe the days of creation were long, long periods of time, then you have a scientific problem. Because on day 3, God created the vegetation. If you believe that the first 3 days were billions of years, you have to explain how the plants managed to survive billions of years without the sun on day 4. So if you were to scientifically go through the creation process, assuming long periods of time, it wouldn't make any sense. We would all be dead. The plants wouldn't be able to survive without the sun. They would all die. The sun would come and just destroy the earth. And then when the birds and the bees come, which pollinate the plants, there'd be no air, there'd be no food, and everyone would die by day 5. Day 6, when the land animals come, there'd be no air, there'd be no food, all the animals die. Adam gets created, he dies instantly. And then in the end, God saw everything was very good. Scientifically, it has to be 24-hour day.
I don't think that's correct. That's not going to say it's
We
not,
have
it's
to
not
stick to the issue tonight. We don't go outside the issue. So I think we need to, if you have a question inside our topic, we deal with it.
It's 24 hours.
Well, that's also something to be discussed in another topic, but that's not our issue tonight. It's not a final thing. I don't like to put it clear cut like that.
Yeah.
We cannot put it clear cut like that.
To be continued.
Yeah, that's to be discussed. It's not a clear cut thing.
It is 24 hours. Any other questions?
So it's not.
It is. Any other questions? No?
Very good. Well, thank you very much.
Well, that was really a good discussion and good lecture. I love the idea that Andrew has put a lot of effort into putting all of these slides together. I'm sure every and each one of these slides has taken a long time from Andrew. And also what I love about it is that he's done a lot of research about it. So it's not just a personal biased opinion. It's something that he has been studying and reading the opinion and its supporters and also its the people who are against it. So I really appreciate his effort, and I'm sorry that I have delayed that for a long time. He should have presented this long time ago. But we love the presentation, we love the effort, and we appreciate this. We thank you again, Andrew, and we'd like to see more of your thoughts. There is always some changing face of science. We have to appreciate one thing, is that if you say scientists say, that is up to the knowledge they have till today. So sometimes science is a bit arrogant in that way, and people depending on science will have the same way of saying it because they feel that they are on rock strong grounds. But science is ever changing. And then when new data come to science, it changes the theories, it changes also the facts that they have, and they say, based on new evidence, we have changed what we have said before, and now it is so and so. What is not changing, what is never changing, is God Himself. And that is something really important, that we know that God is never changing. And that's why when you believe in God, you believe in some high deity that is really not changing. And that's very important, that you put your faith in God who is unchanging. And that's really what we build our faith on. We build our faith on God that's not changing. We're happy to see science, we're happy to discuss it with science, and at all the time, science will come around and say, you were right. If they don't say it today, they will come later on and say, based on new evidence, you were right when you said so and so. So be firm in your faith and depend on your faith that has been handed over to you from your parents, from your grandparents. This faith that we have in our church is something that has been paid for by blood. People fought for it and paid their blood, and that is the martyrs that they have paid their blood to preserve the faith for us. So you can reinvent the wheel. You can try to reinvent the wheel. You can try to prove it again, going through a lot of series of theories and scientific evidence and no evidence. But at the end of the day, the very simple people who believed in God and worked on it and spent all their energy building their spiritual life, they have wasted no time to reinvent the wheel. But sometimes we do that. We spend the time to reinvent the wheel. Please, if you can go straight to faith, you're saving yourself a lot of effort. But if you like to go through the long process of proving or stating the obvious, okay, go through it, and you will come back to the same conclusion, because God is never changing. Glory be to God forever and ever. Amen. Do you have any more questions? Or we finished?